For millennia, this concept of omnipresence felt like a beautiful, perhaps necessary leap of faith, a cornerstone of theology, a puzzle for philosophers, but ultimately, something residing comfortably outside the cold, hard equations of science. It was the domain of the heart, not the laboratory. But what if I told you that the strangest, most counterintuitive discoveries happening right now, deep within the bizarre world of quantum mechanics, are painting a picture of reality that looks astonishingly similar to that ancient spiritual idea? What if the scientific tools we built to dissect the material world are accidentally revealing the very fabric of universal presence? This isn't about replacing faith with formulas, but about seeing if two vastly different paths might be converging on the same mountaintop. Today, we explore a potential scientific framework for omnipresence, born not from scripture, but from the confirmed, repeatable, and utterly mind-bending experiments at the frontiers of physics. Let's anchor ourselves first in something solid, something experimentally verified beyond doubt, even though it feels like pure science fiction: quantum entanglement. Imagine you have two tiny particles, let's say photons, particles of light. Through a specific process, you can entangle them. Think of it like creating an invisible, unbreakable thread connecting them. Once entangled, they behave as a single system, no matter how far apart you pull them. Here's the truly bizarre part. If you measure a property of one particle, like its spin, think of it as pointing up or down. You instantly know the corresponding property of the other particle. Instantly. Let that sink in. Not really fast, not at the speed of light, instantaneously. If one particle is measured as spin-up here on Earth, its entangled twin, even if it's in the Andromeda galaxy millions of light years away, will immediately be found to be spin down, or whatever the correlated state is. There's no travel time for this information. Distance becomes utterly irrelevant. It's as if the space between them doesn't exist for this connection. Albert Einstein famously detested this idea. He couldn't accept something violating his theory of relativity, which states nothing, not even information, can travel faster than light. He derided it as Spökkraftfernwirkung, spooky action at a distance. He was convinced there must be some hidden information, some local variables we just hadn't found yet, dictating the particle's states from the start. But experiment after experiment, culminating in the groundbreaking work recognized by the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics, has proven Einstein wrong on this point. Researchers entangled particles, separated them by significant distances, kilometers, even across cities, and measured their properties. The results were consistently faster than light could possibly account for. The correlation was perfect, instantaneous. The unavoidable conclusion: our universe permits, even mandates, this form of instantaneous influence across potentially infinite distances. This isn't speculation, it's observed reality. Now ask yourself, if a connection, if information about a state, can exist everywhere along that entangled link simultaneously, without regard for distance or time, what else might operate this way? If the universe has this built-in capacity for non-locality, for instantaneous correlation, could this be a fundamental clue about how a presence could permeate everything? Could omnipresence be less about a being traveling everywhere instantly, and more about a fundamental state of interconnectedness, where everywhere is already linked? If exploring the very edge of what we know about reality gets your mind racing, make sure you subscribe. We journey into these profound scientific mysteries every week, uncovering discoveries that challenge everything we thought we knew. Now, let's trace this thread back further, because entanglement isn't the only quantum weirdness pointing towards a strangely interconnected reality. The story really gained momentum with the observer effect. Early pioneers of quantum mechanics, wrestling with the behavior of subatomic particles, stumbled upon something deeply unsettling. When they tried to measure or observe a quantum particle like an electron, it would snap into a definite state. It would have a specific position, a specific momentum. Predictable, solid, like a tiny billiard ball. But here's the twist. When they didn't observe it, the particle seemed to exist in a state of pure potential. It wasn't in one place. It was described by a wave function, a cloud of probabilities, representing all the places it could be, all the states it could possess, simultaneously. Think of it like a blurry photograph capturing all possible outcomes at once. Only the act of looking, of measuring, forced reality to choose one definite outcome, collapsing that wave of possibilities into a single, concrete result. This was revolutionary and deeply disturbing. It implied that reality at its most fundamental level isn't fixed and objective until it's interacted with, until it's observed. The universe, it seemed, behaved differently depending on whether or not something was watching. This shattered the classical view of a purely mechanical universe operating independently of any observer. Suddenly, the observer wasn't just a passive witness. They seemed to be an active participant in the creation of reality itself. This inevitably leads to a profound philosophical question. If observation collapses the wave function and makes reality concrete, who or what is doing the observing when conscious beings like us aren't around? Does the universe just remain a fuzzy sea of probabilities until a physicist sets up an experiment? Does a tree falling in the forest truly make no sound, or even properly exist as a falling tree, if no ear or microphone is there? This puzzle has opened the door to ideas once considered purely philosophical or even mystical. One such idea gaining surprising traction within pockets of the scientific and philosophical communities is panpsychism. This isn't the belief that rocks and rivers have human-like thoughts, but rather the more nuanced idea that consciousness, or at least a rudimentary form of proto-consciousness or awareness, isn't an emergent property that magically appears only in complex brains. Instead, panpsychism suggests that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, woven into the very fabric of reality, perhaps existing in infinitesimal degrees even in individual particles or fields. Think about it. If every particle possesses some basic level of responsiveness or awareness of its quantum state and its entanglement with others, perhaps that constitutes a kind of universal, distributed observation. Maybe the universe is, in a sense, constantly observing itself through the interactions of its most basic constituents. This resonates deeply with the work of physicist David Bohm, who proposed a radical model of reality he called the implicate order. Bohm suggested that the reality we perceive, the explicate order of separate objects in space and time, is merely a projection or unfolding from a deeper, underlying reality, the implicate order. In this hidden layer, everything is profoundly interconnected, and concepts like distance and separation are illusions. He used the analogy of a hologram. If you break a holographic plate, each fragment still contains the entire image, albeit at a lower resolution. Every part enfolds the whole. In Bohm's view, the universe is an undivided wholeness in flowing movement. If this is true, if everything is fundamentally connected in a hidden order, then perhaps omnipresence isn't a superpower of a deity added to the universe. Perhaps it's simply a description of the universe's inherent structure. Maybe being everywhere at once is the default state in this deeper, implicate reality, and our perception of localized objects and vast distances is the true illusion. What if the observer needed for reality to coalesce isn't necessarily a human mind, but this underlying, interconnected field of potential awareness itself? But the quantum weirdness doesn't stop there. It gets stranger, pushing our understanding of time itself to the breaking point. Prepare yourself for the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. This is arguably one of the most mind-bending demonstrations in all of physics, and its implications are truly staggering, almost unsettling even for seasoned physicists. In simplified terms, the experiment involves sending particles, like photons, through a classic double-slit setup. As we know, if you don't watch which slit a particle goes through, it behaves like a wave, creating an interference pattern on the detector screen behind the slits. If you do watch which slit it goes through, even subtly, it behaves like a particle, going through one slit or the other, and the interference pattern vanishes. Standard observer effect stuff. Here's the absolutely shocking part of the delayed choice version. The decision whether or not to watch. Which path the particle took is made after the particle has already passed through the slits, and in principle, should have already decided whether to act as a wave or a particle. Even more bizarrely, in some setups, the information revealing the path can be erased after the particle has hit the detector screen. The results are consistently mind-boggling. The particle's behavior in the past, whether it created an interference pattern or not, changes depending on the choice made in the future about whether to observe or erase the which path information. It's as if the particle knew what measurement you were going to make later and adjusted its past journey accordingly. Let that cascade over you. This isn't just spooky action at a distance. This is spooky action across time. It directly challenges our ingrained notion of linear cause and effect, where the past dictates the future. In the quantum realm, it seems the future can reach back and influence the past. The arrow of time, that seemingly inviolable progression from yesterday to tomorrow, appears to become flexible, even reversible, at this fundamental level. And this isn't random. It's a consistent, predictable outcome of the experimental setup. The system behaves as if it comprehends the entire sequence of events, past, present, and future, all at once. So what does this imply? It strongly suggests that quantum systems might not be bound by our linear perception of time. They might operate in a state that transcends the sequential flow of moments, existing in some sense across the entire timeline, past, present, and future, simultaneously. If a system exists outside of linear time, it wouldn't be reacting to a future measurement. It would simply be in a state consistent with the totality of its interactions across all time. It wouldn't just respond to reality as it unfolds. It might, in some sense, contain the information of the entire unfolding within itself. Now, pause and consider. What kind of entity or principle is described as existing outside of time, perceiving all points in history simultaneously, and interacting with the universe across all space at every moment? This description, emerging from the strangest corners of quantum experiments, sounds uncannily like the attributes ascribed to the divine in countless theological and spiritual traditions across millennia. The idea of a timeless, omnipresent, perhaps even omniscient, aware of all events across time, consciousness, or field. Suddenly, the concepts that seemed purely metaphysical, God's eye seeing all, a presence unbound by yesterday or tomorrow, start to echo in the language of quantum physics. Are we merely uncovering bizarre new laws governing subatomic particles? Or are these experiments offering us fleeting glimpses into the fundamental operating system of existence itself? A system whose properties align intriguingly with ancient descriptions of the divine. Maybe we're not just mapping the building blocks of matter, but accidentally tracing the outlines of something far more profound, something woven into the very logic of reality. Let's take a breath here. This journey isn't just about abstract physics, particles, waves, holograms. It touches the core of what it means to be human, to exist, to perceive, to be conscious. For centuries, the scientific endeavor primarily looked outward, meticulously dissecting the universe, breaking it down into smaller and smaller components, seeking to understand the whole by examining its parts through equations and models. We built telescopes to gaze at distant galaxies and microscopes to peer into the cell. But now, the very tools and discoveries of our most fundamental science, quantum mechanics, seem to be pointing back inward, back towards the role of the observer, back towards the nature of information, back towards the enigma of consciousness itself. If consciousness isn't just a complex biological accident, a ghost in the machine of the brain, but potentially a fundamental feature of the universe, as ideas like panpsychism suggest, the implications ripple through everything we thought we knew. If time, as the delayed choice experiment hints, isn't the rigid linear track we experience, but something more fluid, perhaps even illusory from a deeper perspective, then what does that mean for our understanding of past, present, and future? If the present moment is, in some fundamental sense, all that truly exists, encompassing the seeds of the past and the potential of the future, how does that change our relationship with time, memory, and anticipation? And if information, the bedrock currency of the quantum world, can be intrinsically linked across vast cosmic distances instantaneously, as entanglement demonstrates, then the sense of profound separation we feel between ourselves and others, between mind and matter, between observer and observed, might be far more permeable, far more illusory than our everyday experience suggests. The boundaries we erect, defining me versus not me, might melt away at this fundamental level. In this light, the perceived chasm between science and spirituality begins to look less like an unbridgeable gap and more like two different languages attempting to describe the same ineffable mystery. Perhaps they were never truly in opposition, but rather complementary perspectives on a reality far richer and stranger than either discipline alone could fully grasp. Imagine reality not as a hard line separating the physical from the spiritual, but as a Möbius strip, that fascinating shape with only one surface and one edge. Start tracing its path, and you seamlessly transition from what seems like the inside to the outside without ever crossing a boundary, eventually returning to your starting point. Perhaps science and spirit are like that, two apparent sides of a single, continuous reality. If you've journeyed with me this far, you're clearly someone who isn't afraid to grapple with the big questions, the ones that stretch the mind and don't always offer easy answers. If these ideas are making your neurons fire in new ways, hit that like button. And I genuinely want to know your thoughts in the comments. What does this convergence suggest to you? Are we living in some kind of cosmic simulation? Are these quantum effects hints of higher dimensions? Or is it something else entirely? Something our current concepts and language haven't even begun to capture? Let's push this exploration one step further, beyond even particles and holographic projections, to the very ground of being itself. On the cutting edge of theoretical physics, a powerful idea is reshaping our understanding of matter. Many scientists now argue that what we perceive as fundamental particles, the electrons orbiting atoms, the photons carrying light, the quarks inside protons, aren't actually tiny, solid things in the way we intuitively imagine. They aren't microscopic marbles bouncing around. Instead, the emerging picture is that these particles are excitations, localized vibrations, or ripples in much deeper, more fundamental entities known as quantum fields. Imagine an invisible, infinite ocean filling absolutely all of space, from the farthest reaches of the observable universe right down into the space between the atoms in your hand. This isn't just empty space. It's teeming with potential. This is the quantum field. There isn't just one. There's thought to be a field for each type of fundamental particle, an electron field, a photon field, a Higgs field, etc. According to this view, the field is the fundamental reality. It is everywhere, always present, underpinning everything. What we call a particle, like an electron, is simply what happens when the electron field in a particular location gets plucked or excited, vibrating in a specific, quantized way. Matter isn't separate from empty space. Matter is localized energy, a ripple within these pervasive fields. Light, gravity, the forces that hold atoms together, even you and I, all are manifestations of the dynamic behavior of these underlying quantum fields. That concept alone is enough to shift one's perspective on reality. But now, let's make the truly audacious leap, the one that brings us right back to our central theme. What if these fundamental fields, these ubiquitous, time-spanning, matter-generating substrates of reality, aren't just mathematical constructs? What if they possess some form of awareness or proto-consciousness? Consider the properties we already ascribe to these fields based on quantum mechanics. They are non-local, they exist everywhere simultaneously. Omnipresence. They operate in ways that seem to transcend linear time, as hinted by delayed choice experiments. Timelessness. They intrinsically link all matter and energy that arise from them. Unity connection. They contain the potential and the blueprint for all physical interactions. In a sense, they hold the memory of the laws of physics. Omniscience foundation. If a quantum field possesses these characteristics and also contains the seeds of consciousness, or perhaps is consciousness in its most primal, undivided state, then we might be looking at the very mechanism behind the age-old concept of omnipresence. It wouldn't be a supernatural overlay. It would be the natural behavior of the most fundamental layer of reality. Think back to phrases found across cultures and scriptures, like the biblical passage, "In him we live and move and have our being." For centuries, such statements were often interpreted poetically, metaphorically, attempts to capture a feeling of dependence on a transcendent God. But what if they weren't metaphors at all? What if they were startlingly accurate, literal descriptions of our existence within and as excitations of a conscious, all-pervasive quantum field? If this perspective holds any water, it means we aren't separate beings petitioning a distant deity. We are emergent waves on a divine ocean. Every atom in our bodies, every thought flickering through our minds, every pulse of energy in the cosmos would be a localized expression, a temporary pattern within something infinite, aware, and utterly present. The perceived divide between the physical world studied by science and the spiritual reality sought by mystics wouldn't just dissolve. It would reveal itself as having been an illusion all along, born from our limited perspective. It was always the same reality, the same mystery, viewed through different lenses. Now brace yourself for the final, perhaps most reality-bending twist, one that brings together many of these threads: the holographic principle. In recent decades, inspired partly by the physics of black holes and string theory, a growing number of theoretical physicists have proposed something truly radical. Our universe, the vast, three-dimensional expanse we experience, might not be fundamentally three-dimensional at all. Instead, it could be a kind of cosmic hologram, not like the projections in Star Wars, but in a precise mathematical sense. The holographic principle suggests that all the information contained within a volume of space, everything needed to describe the objects, forces, even the geometry of spacetime within it, can actually be fully encoded on a lower dimensional boundary surface surrounding that volume. Think of it like a 3D image being projected from a 2D surface. In this view, the universe we inhabit, with its three spatial dimensions plus time, might be a vast, high-resolution projection generated from information stored on a distant, two-dimensional cosmic horizon or boundary, perhaps at the edge of the observable universe or related to the Planck scale. What we experience as solid objects, the curvature of spacetime by gravity, the very passage of time itself, all could be emergent features of this holographic projection, governed by laws originating from that deeper, lower-dimensional code. If this is correct, then our reality is far more like an incredibly complex, information-based construct or simulation than we ever dared to imagine. And here's where entanglement makes a stunning reappearance. According to some of the most cutting-edge theories attempting to unify gravity and quantum mechanics, like the AD-SCFT correspondence, entanglement isn't just present in the hologram. It might be the very thing that creates the geometry of the projected spacetime. The intricate network of quantum entanglement between the fundamental units of information on the boundary surface could be what literally weaves the fabric of space and distance within the projected universe. In this picture, the more entangled 2 points are on the boundary, the closer they are perceived to be in the projected spacetime. Space itself emerges from entanglement. This is the ultimate mind-bender. If entanglement, that instantaneous, non-local connection that defies space and seems to operate outside linear time, is the fundamental glue holding the holographic universe together, the thread from which the illusion of spacetime is woven, then it's not just a weird quantum quirk. It's the bedrock architecture of reality. And when you consider the properties of entanglement, its instantaneous nature, its defiance of distance, its connection to timeless behavior in experiments, doesn't it sound remarkably like a modern physicist's description of a substrate capable of omnipresence? A fundamental layer where everything is interconnected, where separation is emergent, where presence is inherent and universal. So we've come full circle. The ancient, seemingly mystical notion of a divine presence existing everywhere simultaneously, unbound by the limitations of space and time, might not require a supernatural explanation outside of physics. Instead, it could be an intrinsic property of a universe that is fundamentally interconnected via entanglement, potentially holographic in nature, arising from unified quantum fields that might themselves possess a form of awareness. Perhaps God, if such a concept applies, isn't a being acting upon the universe from outside, but is the omnipresent field, the holographic code, the timeless pattern from which reality itself emerges and unfolds. Not supernatural, but supernatural, the deepest nature of reality itself. Not magic, but a mathematics and physics so profound it borders on the mystical. Not faith versus science, but perhaps, finally, a convergence revealing omnipresence encoded into the source code of the cosmos. What does this all mean for us, living our lives in this seemingly solid, time-bound reality? It means that the profound questions about an all-present, all-seeing consciousness, questions once solely debated in seminaries and philosophical circles, are now echoing in the halls of physics departments. For centuries, science, with its focus on the measurable and material, often stood in perceived opposition to spirituality, with its focus on the transcendent and experiential. But the deeper scientists delve into the quantum realm, the more the universe seems less like a predictable, deterministic machine, and more like a vast, interconnected web of information and potential, perhaps even a mind. The discoveries are piling up, particles linked instantly across galaxies, entanglement, reality seemingly solidifying upon observation, observer effect, time's arrow bending or breaking, delayed choice. All these experimental results point towards a fundamental truth that resonates with mystics and sages throughout history. Everything is connected. Nothing is truly separate. The implications are genuinely staggering, forcing us to rethink everything. If entanglement connects everything instantly, what does distance truly mean? Is space itself just a construct of our perception, masking a deeper unity? If our observation plays a role in shaping reality, what does that imply about our responsibility and creative power within the cosmos? Are we co-creators of the universe we experience? If time isn't a fixed line, could information, awareness, even consciousness exist as a unified whole, accessible beyond the present moment? We are starting to glimpse a universe where the fundamental layer beneath our everyday experience might be a unified field of information, awareness, and potential, existing everywhere and potentially everywhen. If this is the structure of reality, then omnipresence might not be a miraculous attribute bestowed upon a deity, but a natural, logical consequence of how the cosmos is. Maybe that universal quantum field, the invisible foundation giving rise to all particles and forces, isn't just pervasive but aware, Maybe it is the very mechanism through which what we call God or Source or higher consciousness permeates every iota of existence, not hovering above us, distinct from creation, but intrinsically within the fabric of reality itself, in the ceaseless dance of quantum fields, in the curvature of spacetime, in the very pulse of life within every cell. Now let me be clear. This doesn't mean science has definitively proven the existence of God as conceived by any specific religion, but it strongly suggests something incredibly profound. Science, in probing the deepest nature of reality, might be rediscovering ancient truths about unity, interconnectedness, and presence, truths previously accessed primarily through intuition, contemplation, and spiritual experience. The boundary we constructed between the observer and the observed, the subjective and the objective, the material and the spiritual, seems to be dissolving under the intense scrutiny of quantum physics. What emerges is a vision of the universe that feels both radically new and timelessly familiar. A cosmos not composed of inert, dead matter randomly bumping around, but potentially imbued with living presence, awareness, and profound connection. So perhaps the divine isn't distant or separate at all. Perhaps it's intimately, unavoidably here, woven into every quantum fluctuation, every unfolding moment, every breath we take. And as we develop ever more powerful tools to probe this hidden structure, from quantum computers capable of simulating complex entanglement networks, to advanced AI exploring patterns in cosmic data, to deeper understandings of spacetime itself, we might find that the ultimate discovery, out there, has always been something intimately connected to the awareness looking from within. Maybe the universe is conscious. Maybe it is fundamentally one. And maybe, just maybe, science is finally learning the vocabulary to converse with the mystery it has sought to unravel for so long. Exploring these ideas fundamentally shifts my own perspective. It moves the concept of omnipresence from an abstract theological doctrine to a potential characteristic of the physical reality I inhabit. If interconnectedness is this fundamental, it calls me to live with greater awareness of how my actions, thoughts, and energy ripple outwards. It fosters a deeper sense of empathy, recognizing that the other is, at the deepest level, not separate from me. It invites a sense of wonder not just for grand cosmic events, but for the intricate quantum dance happening within every atom, every moment. This journey into the quantum realm doesn't provide all the answers, but it certainly asks incredibly powerful questions. It challenges us to reconsider the boundaries we've drawn and to open our minds to a universe potentially unified, aware, and present in ways we're only beginning to grasp scientifically. What about you? How do these ideas land? Does the possibility of a scientific basis for omnipresence change how you view the universe, spirituality, or your place within it all? Share your thoughts below. I'm truly curious to hear your perspective. Wishing you health, clarity, and continued curiosity on your own journey of discovery. And if exploring the convergence of cutting-edge science and the deepest mysteries of existence excites you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. In our next video, we'll dive into the mind-bending potential of quantum computers,